Welcome to the Book and You podcast with Tim Elmore. My name's Jared Cagle. Today, we have a very special opportunity to learn from one of our very own Maxwell Leadership thought leaders, Don Yeager. He's also a keynote speaker. He's coached several Fortune 500 corporations. National Geographic actually recognizes him as their storyteller in residence. He's the former editor of Sports Illustrated. And Don Yeager is an accomplished author. And we cannot wait to introduce you to him and hear more from his processes. He's a 12-time New York Times bestselling author. And I think, Don, recently, maybe you crossed over to 12.
There he is.
That's right. That's right, baby. These are my Dion glasses. It was Dion that pushed me over the top. I got to represent. Have to represent. I'm here. Dion is there. And I can't see out of these glasses. So that's I'm going on. That's right.
Don, it's form over function for Dion. So
totally form over function.
Listeners, if you didn't see on video what Don just did, you need to go from audio to video and check Don out with his shades on. It's awesome.
Yeah, Coach Prime, the Coach Prime effect. Don, we're so thrilled.
I got one of the early sets. He sent these to me shortly after he made his deal with Blenders.
Oh, wow.
So these are strong. These are real.
That's fun. That is fun.
Great.
Well, Tim, I am looking forward. Jared, you know I love you, and so let's offer whatever we can in the way of growth.
Don, every time I'm with you, I learn. We get to do events together from time to time and hang out at Book in a Weekend. Let me jump in because I think you've got so much practical stuff to share with our listeners. Let our listeners know about your writing journey. When did it begin? And of course, this latest one also became a New York Times bestseller with Deion Sanders. But talk about the beginning and just a little bit about the journey, and then we'll jump into the granular stuff in just a minute.
So I'm going to skip past the journalism piece of it and just go to book writing because I know that's what people are here to learn about. I actually, what had happened was I wrote a series of stories for the newspaper I was working for at the time. It was an investigative series of stories about the NCAA, the organization that governs college sports, and it was very critical of the NCAA. And as it happened, there was a publisher in Illinois. At the time, the University of Illinois was in a lot of trouble with the NCAA. So the publisher, who was a University of Illinois grad, hated the NCAA, loved my stories, and called and said, would I turn this series that I had written into a full-blown 55,000-word book?
Wow.
And he offered me a grand sum of $2,500 to do that magical thing. And I'll never forget because I think there's some really great lessons in this. Many of us have all had that first book experience.
Yeah.
But for me, again, all my work was done at the newspaper offices or on the road on the newspaper computer. I knew I couldn't use that computer. Went out and bought my first ever personally owned computer back then.
Yep.
And I put it in a little the tiny room in my apartment. And I remember like the first night I went in there, tonight I'm going to write. This is the beginning of my book writing career. I cannot wait. And I got in there and I stared for 3 hours at the computer. Didn't write a single word. And I realized the reason was, and I did it again the next night and the night after that, by the way. So this is I'm clearly not very bright. But what it was, I realized I didn't want to type until it was going to be perfect, right?
Yeah.
I wasn't going to start putting something down until I knew it was going to be something I could be proud of. And it was about then that I realized, you know what, version 1.0 is a whole lot better than version 0.0, right? Wow. And you just have to do it.
Yeah.
You know, I today I refer to taking it out and just writing that, what we call the throw up version, right? The vomit version.
Yes.
And it's where you just get it out and you don't worry about going back to correct. You don't worry about going back to make it right. You just go. And that was my problem. I was so afraid of getting it right, I didn't go. And I know a lot of people that get paralyzed in that moment and in those moments. And you have to realize that this is an iterative process. And
Yeah,
so you're going from 0.0 to 1.0. It will not be published until it's probably 8.0.
That's right.
So
That's
do
right.
not be bothered by the imperfections of 1.0. And I was so worried about it not being right, I didn't do anything.
Yeah. You're right, Don. I think that happens to so many of us. The editor inside of us trumps the creator inside of us, and that's not a good thing. We need to let the creativity come out, and then the editor can come in and make it better. Yeah.
Right. And so, that was the beginning of the journey for me. I was lucky enough that first book came out. It did really well. It landed me on Larry King Live and all kinds of other really good TV shows, because there are a lot of people that hate the NCAA, right?
Yeah.
So it was pretty easy. It's like shooting fish in a barrel. And so I did well. And that led to a second opportunity and a third. And the third book was a book I wrote about Notre Dame called Under the Tarnished Dome. It's a critical book about Notre Dame, looking at Notre Dame's football history and the idea that they held themselves out as being something that they were not. The book became my first ever New York Times bestseller. And so, book 3 hit the list, again, aided by the fact that Notre Dame, kind of put me on the Salman Rushdie list, right?
Yeah.
There was a Notre Dame fatwa put out for me. The more they talked about how bad it was, the more books it sold.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. So
let me jump in real quick, Don. The thing I think I appreciate most about you, one, these two examples you've just given us are examples of how you write about relevant stuff that people are intrigued by and interested in. And then you're such a good storyteller, which is really what these are. Would you agree that's kind of what maybe has been your secret sauce?
I think so. I mean, people ask me all the time, well, how do you create a New York Times bestseller? And I do think the biggest piece of it is right time, right place. I mean, I've written probably, I've written 40 books. 12 have been New York Times bestsellers. Now, my 15-year-old son loves to remind me that means I got 28 losers, right? But that's only in a way that only a 15-year-old son can do.
That's right. Yes.
And but the idea is that some of the 28 that I wrote that didn't make the list may have been better. It may have been maybe some of the best writing I've ever done, and they didn't make the list because they weren't right time, right place. So, I don't think there's magic to making the list. There's good fortune, there's timing, there's other things. There's who do you do it? What is the subject you take on? And so I think that there are too many people that get fixated on things like making the list. Now, it's easy for me to say I got lucky enough to do it 12 times. So I don't fixate on it because I'm lucky enough to have had it happen. But now I realize, had I done that, right? Had I set out and said, this is my goal, I'm going to write a New York Times bestseller, I may never have written one.
Yeah. That's a great point. Don, you're talking to aspiring authors, people that are interested in writing. I think it would be great if you don't mind just really keeping it real here. What were some of the biggest challenges you remember going through that hurdles you had to jump, but talk about some of the challenges along the way.
Well, I think, so one of the things I specialize in is helping other people tell their stories, right? Yeah. So I am brought along with a Walter Payton or a John. I'm brought along by others to help them tell their story, and I think one of the challenges is when someone's getting ready to tell you their story. Most people have a version of themselves that they've told a million times, right? Yeah. But the book version has to go deeper, and and there's a couple things that have to happen there. You've got to establish trust in order to get there. You've got to and trust is earned over time, right? Yeah. And often you're against a deadline, and you're trying to build trust against the clock. And so one of the really most important things I think I've learned is early on in every relationship with someone, if I'm helping them try to tell their story, is just being as real as I can about me.
Yeah.
Because as I open up, it opens the door for them to do the same.
Yeah. Right.
So the biggest challenge, one of the biggest challenges I've always struggled with is getting that place. And they've hired me, or they've chosen me, or they've decided I'm the right person, but they still have to trust me, right?
Yeah.
In order to go below the same words they've said in every time anybody's ever asked them for their life story.
Yeah.
And so in order to try to be unique and better, I have to get below, I have to peel back the layers of the onion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don, that's so fascinating. You said earning trust against the clock. Talk to us about how you build trust, how you earn trust with the audience. Right there, you kind of went into the importance of earning trust when you're telling someone else's story so you can get deeper. What about earning trust with the audience when you're writing the book?
So the audience is gonna trust and believe in you if you early in every storytelling opportunity, you take them someplace unexpected.
Yeah.
And you give them an experience they were not counting on, right? I think I've shared with you, Tim, and Jared, one of my favorite books I had the chance to work on a few years ago was with the golfer Bubba Watson, right? So Bubba Watson had a father dying of cancer. He had a wife who was diagnosed with breast cancer. He felt like cancer was all around him, right? And Bubba has some mental challenges, which we discussed in this book. But during this period of time, Bubba, one of the greatest hitters in all of golf, like this is a guy who lines up and he can scald a golf ball 320 yards, right?
Right.
That's twice what Jared does.
That's right. That's exactly right.
And so here's this guy who's just got this physical gift of being able to do something that almost no human can.
Yeah.
And because he started thinking it was hurting him to eat. And so he was just convinced he had cancer. And the doctors are like, Bubba, now here's your blood work. Here's your screening. You do not have cancer. I don't know. It hurts to eat. Something's wrong and you just can't find it. It took you months to find my wife's cancer. It took you months to find my dad's cancer. You're just not finding mine yet. In his mind, he believed he was dying. And so he stopped eating, and he's out competing on the PGA Tour, and he goes from 190 to and so the opening scene of the book is Bubba Watson stepping on the scale in his bathroom and looking down and seeing the number 162 flash up at him. And I tell the story of him stumbling off the scale, realizing like this is less than he weighed in junior high school.
Yeah.
And he gets to the bed and he hits his knees and just starts praying.
Yeah.
But you know what? You open with that story, and the reader who's thinking they're reading a book about their hero, about this guy who has just done magical things, who is, otherworldly in his golf skill. And he is, he's in his mind is dying. And you're thinking, wow, that is not where I thought this book was going to start. Where's it going to go from here? And so you earn the trust, Jared, of the reader when they go, wow, I'm getting something here that, you know what? I've loved Bubba Watson my whole life, and I never knew that story. And immediately they believe they are in your debt for having brought them something special.
Incredible.
And they feel like they're in your inner circle because
they're stumbling from the scale with me and with Bubba, not with me, but with Bubba. And that's my job as the writer is to put them in the room.
Yes. Yeah.
To have them look down. The 162 doesn't just pop up. It screams at him,
That's right. Wow. Yeah. Don, you're reminding me of something I learned some time ago, but you're a perfect example of this. A reader will expect to hear about your public life. It's public. Mm-hmm. They like to hear your personal life. but what they really want is your private life. And that's what Bubba did with your help. That's a private bathroom story. And you don't get to go in the bathroom with Bubba Watson. And you won them over by telling that story right up front, didn't you?
Yeah. I have to say, my wife and I were last night at dinner with some folks, and this story came up, or a little bit of this story came up, and she pointed out, she said, Bubba Watson probably said the kindest thing that's ever been said about Don. He was on NBC, and they asked him about the book, and he said, you know what, I wrote this book to help other people who are struggling. He goes, but you know what, if it never sells one copy, it helped me.
Wow. Yeah.
And you realize that's where you've done it, right? Where you've been able to tell a story, where you've been able to write something that was useful. And that's what our goal is, right? Not to be, but our goal is to be useful.
Yeah. Don, I have heard you share your writing process before. In fact, at Book in a Weekend, you've been so kind to help those aspiring authors. Would you take a few minutes and talk about your writing process for the folks listening in here?
Sure. What I've shared with your folks, and what I when I'm asked about writing process, I share that for me, the most important thing in any writing project for me is the outline. And I will spend weeks on an outline. Wow. Sometimes my outline's 35, 40 pages long.
Wow.
But the outline, which I do before I ever write a word of the book, because I really believe that if you don't have your roadmap, you shouldn't start driving.
Yeah.
Right?
That's good.
And the outline for me is my roadmap. And I will whiteboard a book, and I'll say, you know what, this is the story, this is the journey we're going to take the reader on.
Yeah.
And I often take it and divide it into 20, because I kind of think that's an easy number for me to remember, 20 chapters. I know that if each chapter is about 3,000 words long, I got a 60,000 word book. Even I can do that math.
Yeah.
And the idea is to try to think about at each chapter, where is it going to go? What is going to be, what's going to happen in that chapter? And then I write the opening 2 or 3 sentences and the closing 2 or 3 sentences of every chapter in the outline, so that I can see, how does this chapter end and how does it flow into the open of the next chapter? Mm-hmm. Because, a good book reading experience is to feel like, wow, I don't want to stop right now, right? Yeah. There's a recognition you have to, because, the plane has landed and it's looking weird that you're sitting there on the, in your seat still reading. But the idea is that you should be able to make it so seamless that it feels, it's 20 individual chapters, but it feels like one story.
Yes. Yeah, that's good.
So outline is the key for me. And the reason I share that, Tim, sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but the reason I share that is because by doing that, and remember, I've written 40, and this didn't really occur to me until about a third of my way through that 40, that when I did that, when I put that much effort on the front end to the outline, what happened was I may wake up one day and go, gosh, you know what? Today I want to tell the story about Bubba's second master, right? And what he went through to make that happen. And that amazing shot that occurred, right, on the 10th hole. Whatever it might be, I may wake up and that may be chapter 17 in the book. And the previous chapter I finished was chapter 4. Well, most people have to write sequentially, right? They don't feel like I've just written chapter 4. It's time for me to write chapter 5. And maybe I'm not really ready to write chapter 5 for whatever reason. By having the outline as I do, I can write chapter 17. I can write out of order. Yeah. I can write because I know how each chapter is going to begin, end, and flow into the chapter before and after it.
That's really good. That makes total sense. Yeah. So the outline is key. Would you talk a minute about the avatar? You select a person to write to. Talk about that.
Yeah, but the other thing I do before any book is I sit down and I really put a lot of effort, either just by myself or with the person I'm writing with and about who we want the reader of the book to be.
Yeah.
And I think one of the big mistakes a lot of people make, I actually offered this advice to an author I had breakfast with yesterday. She was busy telling me how many different groups of people are going to love this book that she's writing. And I said, by the way, if you're writing to that many groups of people, you're writing to no one, right? You need to have a reader in mind. I draw them on a board, on a whiteboard next to my computer when I'm working. And I put characteristics of that person, of that avatar on the board. I even go down to like, what kind of social media are they following? Who are the people they're reading? And I do that so that when I'm writing this, there may be a moment where I have to sit and ask myself, oh man, I'm really kind of stuck here. What does Coach Bob need from me? And then I'm looking at one up there that called Coach Bob on my wall. If Coach Bob were looking at this story, what does he need it to teach him? And so I then I reverse engineer the writing to think about how it needs to land for the person reading it. So instead of writing for me, I'm writing for Coach Bob, and I'm constantly reminded not just about who Coach Bob is, but my responsibility to Coach Bob.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's really good. So good. You have written so many books. Would there still be some surprises that pop up even these years?
All the time.
That might be encouraging for people to hear, even as long into the journey as you've been. Talk about.
Yeah, no, I think there's always something that you because we imagine this to be a really linear process, right? It's going to start here, end there, and it's never quite that. Something's going to happen. The computer's going to crash, and you just lost 1,000 words, or you just lost some of it, and you're convinced in your mind you will never write it as well as you just did.
Yes, it's
you know what? That's garbage. By the way, that's garbage. The truth is, very few of us are Picasso in our first run at it. So don't treat your work as Picasso. So yeah, for me, all of those things have happened. I've had power outages. I've had computers fry. I've had, all the things that you can imagine could go wrong have gone wrong. And you grow to realize we're not curing cancer here, right? Yeah, we're writing. Right. Yeah. So let's pick it up and do it again. It's all gonna be fine.
That's incredible.
Talk about your temperament just for a minute. I'm getting off script here, but that's happened to me too. And it usually takes me a day, like a full day, to get over my frustration, my anger,
See, you're far more intellectual than me, Tim. That's why you look that's why I get past things pretty quickly because I'm long done with the idea that it's going to be a perfect process, right? Okay. Yeah. And I've gotten to the place that I kind of half expect it. There are times when you go for a little while and nothing bad's happened, you're like, dang, where's the black cat? Something's going to happen here. So.
Okay. Gotcha.
Don, there's, you talked about the importance of the outline. That's clearly one of the greatest things that I've learned from you and your process, the importance of an avatar and really zoning in on who the reader is. And then the other thing that I think is a key component to what you do and what you can help us learn is storytelling. And you talked a little bit about that. You even gave us a pretty good glimpse into one story that you told with Bubba Watson. I'd love for you to maybe get a little practical with some of our listeners. Maybe the listener that's not naturally a great storyteller. What would you say to them? I know you developed an exercise even. You may want to share that of ways that can sort of jog stories and help people tell better stories.
Well, yeah. One of the things, Jared, that I mentioned that I'd love to be able to do for these listeners is I've actually even come up with a list of questions that I have asked either of myself or of others that have inspired them to tell a story. Right? It might be something as simple as, is there is there a tweet you sent that you wished you had, or a message you posted that you wished you hadn't, and what came of it? And, what did you learn in that situation? And, it just might inspire something, right? Who knows? To as deep as, is there something that was said to you as a child that left a scar that you still think of today? Right. Those can become deep. I asked that question of Michael Jordan one time, and it was one of the most impactful, conversations Michael and I ever had. But yes, I've got a list of questions, 45 of them, that I regularly run through as I'm thinking about how to draw a really great story, either from myself or from someone else. And I'll give those. I'll give those to you. We can somehow display them, I guess, in the show notes for this show.
Oh, yeah. That'd be incredible, Don. Thanks for that generosity. I can't wait to see them myself. Here's what we'll do. MaxwellLeadership.com/the book in you. We'll have them available there. You can, we'll share a link so that you can get them from there. But then also we'll put them in the show notes, and we'll make them available every way we can. But worst case scenario, go to MaxwellLeadership.com/the book in you, and you can take advantage of those stories.
That's awesome. Yeah, awesome. That's great. Don, you're the best. And I'm so glad you made that available. That's just going to be so helpful.
Well, no, thank you. It's interesting for a lot of people. I made reference to the Bubba saying to NBC, the book helped me. The experience is quite cathartic if done well. Mm-hmm. And it's incredibly educational, for me every time I get to do it with somebody else, right? I'm learning something about them that will make me better. And that's my goal. Yeah. Just to constantly figure out how to be better.
Always growing. Yeah. So as we wind down, Don, I want you again to imagine the avatar right here is an aspiring author that's listening in, that so wants to get that book idea out. What would be some words of advice that you would share over coffee, perhaps, with that aspiring author?
Well, I think we've kind of covered a few of the things, but the most important would be get real on who you want to talk to, right? Yeah. Who are you actually looking to share your content with? Don't say it's everyone. If you're writing for everybody, you're writing for nobody. And then once you start writing, just keep going. Yeah. Don't go back. Don't correct yourself. Don't improve. Just keep going. And your ability to do that allows you to get it out. And that's the hardest part for most people. That's where most people struggle, is that, when you stop, when you hit some kind of roadblock of some kind, picking it back up. So the one piece of advice I would offer is that the way you can best avoid the roadblock is just to vomit.
I love
it. So when you put the headline of this episode, Don Yeager encourages you to vomit, that'd be really awesome.
Right.
Yeah.
We love those. We love those sorts of illustrations around here. Tim has a few as well that come out every once in a while, including about how he births babies.
Yes, that's
when
right.
He writes books. So
I kind of don't want to see Tim birthing a baby.
No, we don't.
I think I'd rather watch him vomit.
Oh, Don, it's been great. Tim, thank you again for your time. We're so grateful, Don, that you joined us, and I wish we had more time with you, because you could just keep going, and
no doubt.
Maybe one day we'll bring you back. What do you think? Maybe after your 13th New York Times.
I don't know. Who knows when that'll be? So.
Let us know, listeners, if you want to hear Don again, and we'll bring him back. There he is, Coach Prime, Don Yeager. There he is. Hey, everyone, we're so grateful for you. Thanks for being here. Remember, until next time, the world needs the book in you.